Hey, thank you so much, Pandit, for being here. Such a pleasure having you on the podcast, The Ex Monk's Drive. I think it genuinely belongs to you.
Thank you so much, Gaurav. Yes, I am an ex-monk, so I'm happy to be on your podcast.
Fantastic, fantastic. So the podcast name is Ex Monks, and here we have an ex monk on the show. What a fantastic coincidence! Thank you so much. Now, here's my first question, right? Pandit, what led you to renounce the world and get onto the path of being a monk when everything was going really well in your life? You were a part of an established business that your family had.
Yeah, so it is a bit of a long story, but I'll try to keep it short. So I grew up in Southern California in
Hmm,
Los Angeles. My parents migrated from India to the US in 1980.
hmm,
And, they came over with little to no money. So it was a day-to-day struggle just to earn a livelihood, just to
hmm,
be able to put food on the table. And my parents were really hardworking. They were working 7 days a week. One of the first things they did, they set up a small shop just selling gift items
hmm.
on Venice Beach. And I don't know if you know where Venice Beach is, but it's just you can Google it, look it up. There's a boardwalk and people set up little shops and there's a bunch of people walking around and then you're just selling gift items, t-shirts,
Hmm.
jewelry, whatever, little things. So that's what they did. And they were working 7 days a week. And I was very little. I was only 7 years old. So I didn't realize all the struggles we were experiencing. They didn't let me feel it.
Hmm.
And within a matter of about 8 years, they established a multi-million-dollar jewelry business in Los Angeles.
Hmm.
That requires not just hard work. You have to have some good luck, some good karma to make that happen, because a lot of people work hard, but they won't achieve that kind of success.
I'm
And
sure.
so life was good for a while. We began living the so-called American dream, which is why everyone comes to the US. We had everything, a big house on the hill with a pool, jacuzzi, a little waterfall, some fancy cars, everything you can imagine. And life was good for many years. And then in the early 1990s, my parents' jewelry factory caught on fire. And
Hmm.
actually it's pretty much burnt down and we lost all our inventory and lost everything. And at that time, we were just wondering what to do. So my dad decided to explore new business opportunities in post-communist Bulgaria.
Hmm.
And his reasoning behind that was because Bulgaria is just coming out of communism, they don't have much, so maybe he can import things there and, buying and selling was his thing. So he went over there. A few months later, we packed up our bags, left Los Angeles behind for good, and moved to post-communist Bulgaria. And
Hmm.
to give you an idea of the contrast that existed between my lifestyle in LA and my lifestyle in Bulgaria, first of all, I felt it was about 30, 40 years behind in technology.
Hmm.
Like you had to go to the post office to make an international phone call, right? You couldn't make an international phone call from your home. And there was everything on TV was in Russian and Bulgarian. No one spoke English. It's just like,
Hmm.
so even getting around doing basic things was difficult because people didn't speak the language. So I was very much a foreigner,
Hmm.
very much a foreigner, because I didn't know the language at all. Everything in the movie theaters was, I don't know, 5, 7 years old, because I don't think American movies were allowed during the communist time. So it was very difficult, challenging. But as challenging as it was a very introspective time in my life, because this is when in the early 1990s, when I'm sitting in Bulgaria trying to make sense of what just happened. I'm like,
Hmm.
why did my life just turn upside down in such an extreme way? Like, what
Hmm.
did I do to deserve this? Why is this happening? Why do these things happen to good people like myself? I don't deserve this. And so, I was really questioning life and why things happen. And I think we
Hmm.
do question life when bad things or difficult or painful things or unexpected things happen. We begin to question life, which is a normal human response to obstacles and painful things.
Hmm.
And that led me to, again, it's a very long story. Every little detail is very long, but I started reading the Bhagavad Gita at that time.
Hmm.
And it really opened my eyes to the whole idea of karma, and that somehow or other, if I'm going through something painful or even something positive, it's a result of some previous karma. And so, as difficult as that was for me to accept, I began to really ponder the idea. And I'm like, well, why else would it be happening to me? Because otherwise, if it's not karma, then it's all random chance.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I don't like random chance. I like random chance less than I like karma, because karma means I can control something. Like I can choose to live and behave differently that
Mm,
affects my future in a more positive or negative way. Random
mm,
chance means I can do great or horrible things, has no impact on me. Like
mm,
it's all random. I could do a ton of good things and like a rock could fall on my head, right? I can do a bunch of bad things and end up winning the lottery. So that's
mm,
random chance. That just didn't sit well with me personally. So I
mm,
chose the path of karma over random chance. So
mm,
like, okay, I have to accept responsibility for whatever's happening. And that's when my eyes began to open about life and spirituality and philosophy.
mm,
I started meditating also in a more deep way. 2 years later, we moved back to the US because Bulgaria was unstable. We felt unsafe there. Came back to the US to the East Coast, to New Jersey. My parents started running a small business in New York City. I helped them with that a little. But overall, I was just not satisfied with how my life was progressing. So then
mm,
I finally decided that I'm going to take some time out and go to a monastery in Mumbai, India.
mm,
And I went there in 1999 with the idea of being there just a month. Like I
mm,
needed time to clear my head, to figure out where life was taking me and how I wanted to live the rest of my life. And so here I am going to this monastery in Mumbai, India. I'm living with 40 monks and everybody slept on a hardwood floor. And I was a guest, but I didn't get a guest room or a mattress or anything. They just said, well, here's the space. Every night you find a space to sleep and you go to sleep. And you have a thin straw mat. They didn't give
mm,
me one. I had my own sleeping bag, which I used.
mm,
And we'd wake up at 5 in the morning, 4:30 in the morning, because our meditation would start at 5. That would go on for a few hours. And the rest of the day was spent serving one another, serving the community. So it was a life of simplicity, humility,
mm,
and service. And of course, during the day, I was studying philosophy with the monks and traveling with them and just spending time with them, understanding what made them choose this. Because these were younger guys. They were in their 20s and 30s. They
yeah.
weren't like 70-year-old monks. And
Mm.
most of them had engineering degrees. So they were educated. A lot of them were coming from decent families, good families. I'm like,
Good
why would
education.
yeah, like why would they leave everything behind? Their life is set. So I was really curious, like kind of like the question you asked me, what made me want to become a monk? I was like, what made these guys want to become a monk? Like I went
Mm,
through a tragedy that put me in this direction. They didn't. They had a pretty good life. They could have just become good income earners. A lot of them would have gone off to another foreign country and made a good living. And so I realized that there was something deeper in life that they were looking for. And that's
mm,
something I was looking for too. And people move into this direction for many reasons. Not everybody has to go through a tragedy or some major setback. It could
mm,
just be your deep inquisitiveness about life and just whatever life has to, and the universe that could make you want to go in this direction. So instead of a month, I spent 6 months in India. I went to a few different ashrams and monasteries, just really exploring
mm,
myself and life. Came back to the US and moved into a monastery in New York City.
mm.
And I thought I'd spend maybe 3, 6 months there. Ended up spending 15 years of my life
Wow.
as a monk. And
Wow.
yeah, this is not something you can plan, right? It's not something I planned to do. I went with the idea of being as living with monks for a month. Like a lot
Mm,
of people, you take a little retreat. That was my idea. I didn't expect it to turn into 15 years. And when I was living in the monastery, I was in New York City. I was doing a lot of talks and workshops for students on college campuses like Columbia University, New York University, and I started traveling around the country speaking on college campuses on mindfulness, stress management, work-life balance, meditation. So I was doing all of these things, and then about 9 years ago, I decided I wanted to take everything I'd learned into corporations and
mm,
teach corporate professionals about mindfulness, how to
mm,
be mindful at work
mm,
with
mm,
your
mm,
colleagues. And so I left the monastic life behind and I've been speaking in corporations for the last 9 years. Now it's been globally, I've been speaking in
Yeah.
corporations.
Yeah.
And so that's, in a nutshell, my journey into why I renounced the world and why I'm back in the world now.
Yeah. 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 So here's a question. Of course, I would want to understand after 15 years of practicing mindfulness and 8 years of teaching mindfulness and meditation and what it means to live a mindful life, the question that you asked with which everything started for you, is it karma? Is it random chances? Where is that question? Is it still there, or you still have now you have better clarity around that?
Oh yeah, that question was answered when I first started reading the Bhagavad Gita in the mid 1990s, early to mid
Hmm,
1990s.
hmm,
And it became clear to me that really nothing in life is random. Everything is happening for a reason. And whatever is happening in our life right now has been set up by our previous actions.
hmm. And
And
previous as in?
previous as in either in this life, or getting more spiritual for those who want to believe it, in a previous life.
Got it. And that's what I
So
wanted to clarify. Yeah.
yeah, because our life is not just limited. Like, you look at a child comes out with a very specific personality,
Hmm,
and they're already fixed on what they like and don't like.
hmm,
They're pretty determined on what they like. Yeah, some things we can teach them. And you just wonder, where's that coming from?
hmm,
Could it be that it's all random? I guess you could, if you're satisfied with that, then that's fine. That it's all just random. I don't think so, because even in the womb, there's research showing that children are dreaming. But my question is, what are they dreaming about? We dream about things that happen during the day, or things that have happened in our life. That's what we usually dream about. So what are they dreaming about if they haven't had any previous experiences? Right? Energy is not destroyed, it just transforms, it keeps going. And for a lot, this will sound very foreign, very strange concept. But what are children dreaming about in the womb? Even a child, when they're sleeping, sometimes they'll smile, sometimes they'll cry. What are they laughing and crying about? They even haven't had many life experiences. An infant, a 1 month old, starts smiling. You're like, why is it smiling? What is it remembering? So there's some mystery that we can't see, but the
hmm,
Gita and a bunch of other spiritual texts around the world talk about previous existences, that we're basically we're on a journey of life,
hmm,
right? It's like a train that has many stations,
hmm,
and we get
hmm,
off on one station, experience that station, and then we jump back on the train of life. We jump off at another station, experience the food and different things they have to offer there, then jump back on, and then you go
yeah.
back on until we get to the destination we're meant to get to.
Hmm,
So life
hmm,
is like that train with many compartments. Some are third class, some are second class, some are first class, and each station that we stop at has different things to offer us. And
hmm,
we go through exploring and experimenting with these different offerings that life has for us,
hmm.
and hopefully learn from each offering.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm still wondering when you said that it could be the karma from this lifetime or from the past lifetimes for all those people who believe in that. And the way you supported that argument when you are saying that children in the womb also they dream. What are they dreaming about? That's a question for all of us to ponder on. Moving on, Pandit, you said something led you to share this message with the corporations. And today you are considered to be one of the authorities in the space of mindfulness. You are an authority when it comes to leading with empathy. You are an authority when it comes to talking about depression and the stress and the anxiety. What led you to come back to this world?
So when I was doing the similar types of talks in college campuses, I noticed how much people were struggling with their own mental health. Students that are so driven to succeed and being pushed by their parents to succeed, and society to succeed, and they end up in a college like Columbia University, New York University, or top coveted schools. There's so much pressure on them. And a lot of times that pressure can lead them into anxiety and depression. And you see some of these top colleges, every few years, there's somebody who commits suicide. And so you're wondering, like, they've achieved everything in one sense. They're at the top schools. That means they're going to come out just making a good income no matter what they graduate in. You know, anybody who graduates from there gets picked up by a good company. Like, what's going on? So there's something that's been unaddressed in their life. And now they're carrying that into the corporations with them as well. And so I realized that I wanted to be able to just help more people. Like, I was very happy doing the, helping college students, but I'm like, there's so much more stress and anxiety in the corporate world. Like now, because a lot of times in college, you can be in a little bit of a bubble. You have some shelter. Someone else is paying the bills a lot of times, or maybe you don't have to pay them right away. But when it comes to corporate life, you have your work pressures, you have a boss over your head, you have to pay bills, you have family members, you have kids, their education. There is so much pressure. How is a human being actually able to deal with all of these pressures and remain sane? And I wanted to see if I could provide some knowledge, information, and practice to people in corporate America to help them deal with all of this work-life balance that we are always struggling with. So that was a major factor. I'm like, let me see if I'm up to this challenge, if I can actually provide some value to all of these individuals. And of course, the other thing I wanted to go in the direction of having a family, right? I started to feel that, just like when I was feeling the need to leave it behind and go into monastic life, I started feeling the need for having a family. And so it was both on the professional and personal reasons that are a combination of both made me decide that, okay, I'm going to go ahead and step out, enter the world, and continue my work in the world. I mean, even when I was in the monastery, it's not like I was isolated living in a cave. I was living in Manhattan, New York City. Like, next to me was a tattoo shop. Then there was 3 bars. Then there was a pizza shop, a laundromat, a bakery, a nightclub across the street. Like, I was living not in a cave in India. I was living in the jungle of Manhattan, where Friday night outside our monastery, people were drinking and partying, and loud music was happening every Friday and Saturday night. So when we're meditating at 5 a.m., I can hear loud music and drunken conversations right outside the window, right? So in one sense, I was never living a reclusive, isolated monk life. I was very much, quote unquote, an urban monk, as the title of one of my books is.
Absolutely,
Urban
yeah, yeah. But I'm very curious. You just mentioned that you were living in the jungle, the concrete jungle of Manhattan, and outside that monastery, there were pizza centers, there were bars, everything was happening. The life was happening there, right? Just curious to understand from you, what are the myths that people have about being a monk that you would like to place on records for us?
The biggest myth that I encounter from people when they find out I'm not a monk, they're like, oh, I didn't realize you could not be a monk once you're a monk. I'm like, yeah, that's a common misconception, because even according to the Vedic or Indian or Hindu perspective, generally the monk life was initially like as a student, like you're a student of life, of philosophy, of spirituality. And like any student, you're supposed to graduate and move from that. Unless you find that you're very deeply rooted and very peaceful in that environment. And even then, generally, you wouldn't become a monk until you were 50 or older. That means by then you realize that, okay, I don't need a family. I'm happy by myself. I'm peaceful by myself. And I don't want all the things that these families have. When you find that peace within, then you can actually become a monk. Generally, it's a time for learning, studying, philosophy, spirituality, meditation, whatever your practice is, sadhana, you learn all of that. And then you take it in with you into the world, into your family life, into your work life, into your society and community. So that's one of the biggest myths, is that, yes, you can leave it behind. It's meant to be a training ground for most
Got
people,
it.
just like a college or a university is, right? So that's one of the biggest myths that's out there, that you can't go back, when most monks, actually, I would say 95, 98, 99% of people who join a monastery will leave the monastery. That's been my practical experience. That's what I've seen. They will leave it and pursue other things, and take what they've learned, take it with them, and implement that into their own personal and professional life.
Thank you for sharing that. In fact, in one of the interviews that I was listening to, you mentioned that you spent 15 years as a monk dedicated to serving others while discovering your purpose. Now, here are the two questions. One, what is your purpose? If you were to define your purpose, how do you define that? That's the first question. The second question is, and that's a question that I've been dealing with for quite some time, why do we need any purpose to live? I feel having a purpose is also an attachment. So if there is an attachment to purpose, why do I need a purpose?
Yeah. So in terms of every human being, it's the foundation of our existence is really to serve. But I think the purpose of every human being is really to serve others while serving ourselves as well. So as you can see, that our entire life from beginning to end, we're engaged in serving others. We're serving our family, we're serving our community, we're serving the government, right? We're serving someone. Our parents are serving their kids, kids are serving their parents, we're serving our friends. It's something we can't live without. It's what it means to be human, to serve. People have pets, then they're serving their pets. So we cannot live without serving. I think to serve is to be human. It's just an essential part of who we are. And I think we've all experienced that time when we served someone and we felt so good at the end of it. Somebody in need, or just someone, it just makes it, it's really what brings about happiness. Service brings happiness.
But isn't that the dichotomy? Because on one hand, I am getting attached to happiness. And that's the question that I've been asking myself, that, okay, the first is when we are attached to the goals. The second one is we are attached to purpose. As Alan Watts says, we're always clinging onto something. And unless we release what we are clinging onto, we'll never be able to experience freedom in life. And that means the less things that I'm dependent on, the less karmas I'm adding to my life. What's your take on this?
See, attachment isn't a bad thing. I think in spiritual circles, we often label attachment as bad. There are good attachments in life. Me being attached to taking care of my family is a good attachment. Anyone who tells me that's not, I would think they're psychotic. I'm like, is something wrong with your head that you're saying I shouldn't be, like, if I don't take care of my child, it's going to grow up to be like emotionally deprived. Like, that's a bad service I've done to my child or spouse or other family members. If I'm not attached to them and their well-being, I think that's an unhealthy human behavior. There's unhealthy attachments as well. Maybe we're attached to just like making money to such a degree where we don't mind stepping on others and crushing others and backstabbing others. That's unhealthy. If I'm, attached to like drinking alcohol all the time and getting drunk, that's a bad attachment. If I'm gambling all the time, wasting away my money and energy, that's unhealthy attachment, right? If you're if you're attached to eating healthy food, more power to you. Stay attached that way. If you're attached to serving people and helping them in their life, more power to you. And I pray you can always remain attached in that way. So attachment isn't about just making us happy. It's about helping others become happier. And the
mm,
natural byproduct of serving others is happiness comes automatically. It's like
mm,
when you eat food, you're not making a separate effort to make sure the energy from that food is distributed throughout your body. It
mm,
happens automatically. You
mm,
get
mm,
nourished and you get
mm,
satisfied.
mm,
It's a
mm, mm,
byproduct of eating the right food, right? It just naturally happens. You're not like, okay, I'm eating now. Oh, I hope I'm gonna try to be satisfied because I just put food in my mouth. No, it just happens. You eat the right
mm,
food, like, oh, body's strong, energetic. Ooh, I feel
mm,
good. I want some more. Now, eating too much is the bad attachment.
mm, mm, mm,
So attachment in itself isn't bad. Being
mm,
attached to feel happiness comes naturally as a result of our behavior. When we
mm,
serve others, help others, even if it's a colleague in a corporation that we may be competing with, if we assist them, we've done a good deed as a human being. And it's
mm,
okay to
mm.
be attached to doing good things. And
Yeah,
I would
yeah.
disagree with anyone who says, oh, I shouldn't be attached to that. I'm like, well, you can choose to live your life that way. I'm choosing to be attached to serving others and helping others feel good.
Mm. Where would you fit in the concept of equanimity? They say no affinity, no aversion. Equanimity. Where would you place that?
So it is. So I think that when we work with detachment
Mm,
and we are able to accept whatever the outcome is, because that's not in our hand,
got it.
accepting the outcome is equanimity. So I can try to help someone get over their depression or
Mm,
anxiety or work life balance. The outcome is not up to me because ultimately they have to be able to follow the suggestions and tips that I provide. I
mm,
can't be attached to that outcome. I hope the best for them. I hope they can adopt this. But if
mm,
I'm worried about the outcome, which is out of my hand, see, that's not helping me and it's not helping anyone. And
mm,
so doing our duty, which
mm,
is the key teaching of the Bhagavad Gita, it's the essential teaching. Do the, like, as a parent, you can do the best you can to educate
mm,
your child, to teach them manners, to live morally, to live ethically.
mm,
If somehow, without you knowing, they develop bad friends, start doing drugs and end up robbing a bank, you'd be like, what? When did this happen?
mm,
So you don't know, right? We have to be
mm,
detached. Yes, but it's definitely, you're going to feel remorse. You're going to feel sad. You're going to
mm,
cry. And
mm,
that's
mm,
all part of
mm.
being human. We
Yeah.
cannot deny those feelings. It's just a part
Mm,
of human life that we can't ignore. Still, as long as we've tried our best to do our best, then if we can make peace with that, then we can have equanimity.
mm. Thank you. Thank you so much for defining equanimity the way you did. You also use the word detachment. Let's take a little deeper dive into that. I have personally come across a lot of so called God men, busy hoarding things, having possessions, still doing things to expand their influence, their name, their fame. Where does detachment fit in the larger scheme of thoughts for you? I mean, in India,
So
you'll find so many examples and celebrated godmen,
when you say God men, you mean like spiritual people?
spiritual masters. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Hmm. So again, name, fame, and influence can be good or bad.
Hmm,
If we are using our influence to help people become better people, then what's the harm? That means we can do good on a broad scale. So earlier we were talking about Gaur Gopalji, right?
yeah.
He's a great example of someone who's using his influence to help millions of youth and adults around the globe,
Hmm,
right? And he still lives a very simple life, from what I
mm,
know. He lives very simply, actually, in a small room. That's it. Right? So if we're living simply still, I mean, and what is simple and what's not is that's also very subjective, right?
yeah,
It doesn't have to be like everybody has to live in a one room, right? But the point
precisely.
is, if we're using our influence to help others improve their life and live morally, live ethically, be kinder, be more compassionate, that influence is so important. It's a wonderful
Mm,
thing because you're using it to affect the masses. Because right now, there are too many negative messages of greed and pride and hoarding being promoted. So we need
mm,
other people to gain influence and spread a positive message.
mm, mm.
Otherwise, how is society going to try to improve?
Ah, beautiful perspective. Thank you, Pandit. Pandit, let's say take one step forward. And as I mentioned, you are an authority when it comes to delivering seminars or workshops. You're an author of a couple of books. You talk about leading with empathy. What does that mean when we're talking about leading with empathy? Somehow, I have never understood the word empathy. People say getting into somebody else's shoes. I'll never be able to experience the pain what the other person is experiencing. The other person will never be able to experience the pain that I am going through. Only I can experience. When I cut my finger, only I know what it feels like to have that. What does that mean when you're saying leading with empathy?
I agree with you that it's almost impossible for one person to jump into the shoes of another because if you're jumping into the shoes of somebody, let's say somebody 35 years old, I don't know how they've lived for the last 35 years, what
Precisely.
pain they went through in their childhood, what struggles, what privileges they had, all of these things for me to understand, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't try.
Hmm,
It doesn't mean we shouldn't try. And leading with empathy, especially if you're a manager, you're a boss, a leader in an organization, it becomes part of your job description to try to understand what others are going through. Otherwise, we will just treat them like numbers.
hmm,
We won't
hmm,
even really
hmm,
treat them as people, as human beings. So, to some degree, we can relate to each other. You're a boss, you have a family. You realize, well, my employee has a family too, and they need to spend time with their family. So let
hmm,
me create an environment where there can be work-life balance, because if the
hmm,
family is peaceful, then they'll be peaceful and happy, and that means they'll be able to work in a more productive capacity and a healthier capacity when they come to work. As a
hmm,
boss, you realize when I have a fight with my wife and my kids, I show up to work all grumpy and angry.
hmm,
Well, and maybe it's because I'm working 18 hours a day, and maybe that's adding to it because my family's
hmm,
upset that I'm not home. So now they're arguing with me about all kinds of things that don't even have anything to do with anything. They're just
hmm,
feeling neglected. So am I creating a similar environment for my employees that they're having fights with their family and I expect them to show up to work happy,
hmm,
peaceful, and productive? And now how are they
hmm,
going to deal with my clients in a happy, peaceful, productive way? No, their anger and frustration is going to show up when they
hmm,
deal with the clients, and now that's having a negative impact on the name and the prestige of that organization because the people aren't dealing with clients in a healthy and positive
hmm,
way. So leading with empathy, it is possible to be able to try to step into the shoes of another, because even though we can't fully understand what others are going through, we do have similar experiences that allow us to some degree understand what others are going through,
yeah,
and that can't be denied. And
yeah,
so we try our level best to lead in a way and realize what are some of the things that my colleagues are going through, and let me see if I can help them with that, as opposed to judging them, assuming they're lazy, assuming they're incompetent, or they're
hmm,
not pulling their weight, all of these things that we come up with, just asking them, hey, how's it going? Is there anything
hmm,
I can help you with? That's what I would
hmm,
say is leading with empathy.
yeah. It reminds me of a conversation with a friend and an author of a book called Reboot. His name is Jerry Colonna. And he said, if only I can ask the other person, how are you? From a genuine intent. I'll not be surprised that the other person would start to cry because there's
Hmm.
so much going on in everyone's life. You never know what the other person is going through. Pandit, I do understand that at the cognitive level. If I'm speaking to a group of 100 people, and if I would ask this question, how many of you make a genuine attempt to understand the other person, to empathize with what your team members are going through? I'll not be surprised if 100 out of 100 people would raise their hand. And yet, at least I have not seen most of us implementing that in our workplaces. What do you think? Where is the gap between knowing something that I should be doing and doing something, knowing I should empathize and lead with empathy and putting it into action? What is the missing link here?
I think it all also to some, I mean, we can learn these things, but it does start in our childhood, right? And hopefully as parents, we can teach our kids empathy at an early age,
Mm,
because then it stays with them for the rest of their life. And that's going to be an empathic leader one day, right? But I think we ultimately have to make a decision in our life that I'm going to start leading with empathy. And when I ask a colleague how you're doing, that I'm going to be willing to sit and stand there and hear what they're saying. And usually it can't really just happen over a cup of coffee in the coffee room. It probably requires saying, hey, let's check in with each other. Let's set aside 15 to 20 minutes and just check in personally. It requires setting aside some
mm,
time specifically for that person, for that, you know, interaction. And not like you're walking down the hall and your colleagues coming by, hey, how's it going? Good. How was your weekend? Great, fantastic. All right, see you later. So it has to be like, hey, let's check in. We haven't checked in a while. Let's schedule it and just see how, personal check-in. And now you have nothing else going on. You're not rushing from one task to the other. You're not rushing from one meeting to another. You're just with them and they're just with you. And that's when that exchange can actually happen properly in a meaningful way.
yeah, making sure you make time for the other person, making sure that I make time for people I genuinely care for. Considering the world that we are living in right now, and especially post-pandemic world, the culture in organization is very hybrid in nature. People come for 2 days, they're not coming for 4 days. What do you think? How can we develop those positive social connections in today's environment?
Well, two ways. One is making the most of the time that we have in person. So that, hey, I'm going to be in the office on Thursday. Are you going to be there? Okay, well, let's plan to have lunch together and connect with each other personally, right? Making the most of that time. But there's fully possible to schedule a call, a video call, and still have that connection. I mean, people are connecting with their relatives around the globe. So why not with a colleague who's maybe in another city or another part of the globe, just setting aside a virtual call and video call and just getting to know them. Say, hey, this is the purpose of this is just I want to just know how you're doing. We've been working together for the last 12 months, but we haven't had a chance to really talk. I just wanted to know who you are, and I wanted to share a little bit about myself with you. Like, that's
Mm,
really cool. At the end of it, now you know each other. You realize
mm,
that there may have something in common, like you and I realize we have so many people that we know in common. We didn't realize that until this happened. When you first reached out to me, I was like, I don't know who this person is. But
mm,
initially, then we started talking like, oh, wow, we know several people in common. So
mm.
it's a
Mm.
beautiful thing. You just opened up a whole new relationship when you set aside
Beautiful.
that time, even in a hybrid work environment.
Yeah, yeah. But one of the assumptions that I've heard people talking about, and especially I do a lot of work with C-suite executives, one of the assumptions that people have is that in case I start to walk on this path of spirituality, in case I start to walk on the path of mindfulness and meditation and building connections with people, I might lose track of the bottom line or the top line on which I'm evaluated on. What's your take on that? where do these two worlds converge? On one hand, we are talking about mindfulness, we are talking about empathy, we are talking about connections, we are talking about mindfulness and meditation. On the other hand, we are evaluating executives on the top and bottom line, on the results that they are delivering, the revenue that they have been able to generate in the organization.
I think if people look at it carefully, they will see that there's research supporting that the more we focus on empathy and mindfulness, the better
Hmm.
results we'll have even in our workplace and business.
Hmm.
So, because the only way, there's one company, uh, I read this article about Southwest Airlines
Yeah.
here in the US, and they prioritize their employees more than their customers and shareholders. Now, that's interesting. You think, well, shareholders, obviously, well, if the employees are happy, then the customers are happy. If
Hmm.
employees aren't happy, then they won't deal with customers properly.
Hmm.
And then the reviews, Google reviews will go drop right down and no one's going to fly. And
Hmm.
if customers are happy and employees are happy, shareholders are happy because everyone's flying with them.
Hmm.
So that's mindfulness. That's
Hmm.
empathy. That's kindness in the workplace.
Hmm.
So I think people have to take a moment and realize that these things actually improve business and culture and profits. Because
Hmm.
when you have loyal employees and loyal customers, that's how businesses grow steadily. A problem is a lot of people leave because they're not appreciated at work. They don't like the
Hmm.
workplace culture. People, there's one saying that people don't leave jobs, they leave managers
Hmm.
because the manager is not kind and caring.
Hmm.
They're just can be a little,
Hmm.
task oriented, taskmasters
Hmm.
with little to no soft skills. And what happens? Really good people end up walking away after you've spent years training them and paying them. Now they're taking all that knowledge to someone else and maybe some of your
Yeah.
secrets as well. So I think if we take a breath and realize that being a good person and being a good leader, well, actually is good for business, I think that's when the transformation is going to happen.
Hmm. Thank you. And the last question is, since we are talking about corporations and you do a lot of work with leaders all across the world, if you were to share a couple of tips that could allow us to put mindfulness into our day-to-day life, you know, some people say they start meditating. That's one way, of course. But what are the other ways that you can recommend us that will allow us to put mindfulness into day-to-day practice when I'm eating, when I'm interacting with my team members, when I'm traveling to my office, when I'm coming back, when I'm dealing with people on the road, right? What's your take on that?
So just like, we say that at least it's said that breakfast is the most important meal of the day for the body. So I do think if we start our morning with a little mindfulness and meditation, even if it's as little as 3 to 5 minutes,
Mm,
centering ourselves, realizing that there's a bigger purpose in life, and telling ourselves that I'm going to try my best to be kind today. I'm going to be present with the people that I'm going to be interacting with. And if someone's misbehaving in the workplace or on the road, that I'm going to have some empathy, understanding that maybe this person's going through a very difficult time and that's why they're acting out and lashing out. Not that they're like that. But
mm,
usually we misbehave when things aren't going right or we're going through a problem or difficulty or pain in life and we don't know how to express it, and it comes out through unkind words or unkind action towards others. It's like, for example, someone who's a bully at school,
mm,
they've probably been bullied in their life, or they've gone through, maybe they had parents who bullied them or they had other people who
mm,
bullied them, and now they're bullying others in school just to act out, to get their aggression out,
mm.
unresolved aggression. So that's just a kinder way to approach the world.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that what they're doing is right, but just for us to realize that, there's pain in there and this is just them expressing their pain.
Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
may want to avoid that person, but just having that approach, because that approach carries into the workplace. If someone's
Mm,
not performing at the level you wanted them to or you hoped, like maybe there's something going on in their life. And
You
maybe
never
if I
know.
take to figure that out and show some kindness, it could help them.
Mm,
And it builds my relationship with that person because we took the time to be kind.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Thank you so much. As they say, that kindness and compassion will never go out of fashion. You
Yeah,
never know
that's a
the
good one.
story. You never know the story the other person is going through. And if I could be kinder to the other person, I think that's the only way to live a life, as you said, from your purpose. Thank you so much, Pandit, for sharing your wisdom, your insight, your experiences. It was an absolute pleasure having you with us and sheer honor to listen to your first-hand experience, somebody who has lived from a space of mindfulness for 15 years and then sharing. So, shukran.
Thank you so much, Gaurav. It was a pleasure speaking with you on these beautiful topics. And I hope people can find some value in these messages.